Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen live, on air, or online, and also at iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, nccradio.org, and on the WHPC app. Download it today. Also, podcasts of the show are available wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Google Play, and Spreaker. And thank you so much for joining us today. We're very happy to have on board as our guest Jonathan Goldman. Jonathan is an international authority and pioneer in the field of sound healing. He is the author of numerous books, including The 7 Secrets of Sound Healing and the best-selling The Humming Effect, and also a classic called Healing Sounds. And we're going to talk to Jonathan today about many aspects in the world of the power of sound to heal and transform. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jonathan.
Ellen, it is a real pleasure to be talking to you. Thank you for having me.
So let's go back in time to the little boy, Jonathan. What led you on a path to sound?
By gosh and by golly, I have to tell you that I have many stories, but the best one would be about 1979, actually, when I have graduated Boston University and I'm playing in a rock and roll band in a seaside bar in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And I come in from the break, strap on my guitar, begin singing and playing, and look at the audience and realize that there's an ambiance of negativity and violence in the audience. Now, no doubt the alcohol and the different intoxicants that were being imbibed help create this ambiance of negativity, but also the music that I was creating at the time was helping induce this. And I had the thought, gee, I wonder if music can be used to make people feel good. And that thought shifted within about a week to, I wonder if sound can be used to heal. From there, doors opened up. I basically got a master's degree from Lesley University researching the uses of sound and music for healing. I took my record label, which was a new wave label, and turned it into a new age label. And I've written a number of books, and voila, here I am.
And you're also the director of Sound Healers Association and president of Spirit Music in Boulder, Colorado. So you really have deeply involved yourself in sound. What kind of music were you playing that night? I'm curious when you discovered that perhaps it was having bad vibrations instead of good vibrations.
Okay, so in my book, Healing Sounds, is a formula, which is frequency plus intent equals healing. And I'd love to talk about that in a minute. But on a level, I think the intention of a lot of the music is so very important. And the music that I was creating at the time would have been in the level of less than positive intentionality. It could have been called punk rock or new wave or something like that. And it was really not geared toward putting people in a positive state of consciousness. I'm being kind, but in other words, after that experience, I thought, oh, gee, all rock and roll is bad. And that's so far away from it because, for example, some of the most light-encoded healing music was from the Beatles, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. How much higher of a consciousness can you have than that? So it was just the type of music that I personally was creating at that time.
Well, I would say during those years, and even to this day, I am a Grateful Dead head. Mm-hmm. And I even followed the Dead in a van for several years and set up at all of their concerts and really got involved. And I found that it definitely felt like healing music to me.
by gosh, if I told you that I was probably for one of the last Dead concerts in the Denver area, I was actually on stage. I was behind the amplifiers with a friend of mine named Kitaro, who was a good friend of Mickey Hart's. So he had us on stage checking out the fact that they were using this, what at the time was breakthrough equipment in terms of having the monitors in their ears as opposed to these on-stage monitors. So it was a cool experience.
Well, I'm very familiar with Kitaro also, and I believe I was at that concert in Denver. I know I drove there with our van a few days before they had it. So a lot of people were camped out in front of where the concert was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be another thing that we actually have passed through together.
Right.
So you mentioned something really interesting in terms of the formula frequency plus intent equals healing. What do you mean by that?
Ellen, maybe one of the more important things that I've brought down to the planet. I've made over 30 award-winning albums for relaxation, meditation, written over half a dozen books that are, I think, great primers in the field of sound healing. But this formula, frequency plus intent equals healing, is so very important because it brings into, if you like, our consciousness, the awareness that it's not only the vibration of the sound in terms of its cycles per second, which is called its frequency, but also the energy that is encoded upon the sound, which I call intention. And when I first came up with that, and it was first put into Healing Sounds made public, and I would be dealing with all these different doctors and scientists and saying, hey, have you ever thought of the importance of intention? And they would look at me as though I was really strange. Nowadays, of course, we have people such as Masaru Emoto's work with water molecules, or Joe Dispenza's work with You Are the Placebo, or Dr. Bruce Lipton's work with the biology of belief and understanding how our consciousness can encode and change and shift things. And that particularly is true when we work with sound.
That's an interesting thing. I think one thing we should have had, unless you have it there, since we're talking so much about sound and we're on radio, everything is sound, is actually to listen to some of the music that you have developed. I don't know if you can get that together on your end while we're actually on the phone, but that would be a nice addition.
I can't do that now. Had I known, I would have. But regardless, I would like to suggest that in the new edition of the book, there's over 100 minutes of downloadable audio of different aspects of harmonic singing and stuff like that, which brings us to the question of what are harmonics. And if I were to say that harmonics are the color of sound, they're the mystical aspect of sound. And basically as we begin to listen to harmonics, we open up our ears and our brain to a whole new neurological level of perceiving sound. And in a way, as soon as you begin to shift, if you like, the way that you perceive sound, then you've shifted one of your primary five senses and you've gained a new superpower.
When you talk about harmonics, you're talking about things that vibrate with each other in a certain ratio.
Right. And bottom line is that this is the 30th anniversary of this book. And I really, if you like, I got in meditation that it would be really good to reintroduce it. It's never gone out of print, but I thought that even though a lot of the principles that I introduced in Healing Sounds have become commonplace in the field of sound healing, people still don't really get the concept of harmonics. And harmonics are, if you like, multiple layers of simultaneously created sounds that are mathematically related, and they are actually responsible for the timbre or tone color or the color of sound as we experience it. So, as I was mentioning, like frequency plus intent, a lot of people these days have really gotten into the concept of frequency. But they don't realize that for the most part, unless you're in a scientific laboratory that's generating an artificially created sound, there is no sound on the planet that is naturally created that is a single tone. They're actually composite frequencies called harmonics. And these harmonics, if you like, are so unique in terms of, even though when they manifest in a sound, they happen all together, but it's like different shades of blue, green, yellow, and white will come together to create the sound of, but sonically, of our voice or a musical instrument. So, for example, they took the harmonics away from a violin, an oboe, and a piano, and you couldn't tell them apart because it's the harmonics that make the instrument or our voice sound the way it does. And in fact, our voices are so unique that our voices are like, if you like, they call it a voice print. And our voice print is like our thumbprint. It is as unique a phenomena as that. And it's all based upon those harmonics in our voice that are most audible.
I'd like to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen online at www.nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio. And for more information on today's guest or topic, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. Today, our guest is Mr. Jonathan Goldman. We're talking about sound healing and also about the release of his book, which actually he wrote many years ago, but this is a release of The Power of Harmonics. The name of the book is Healing Sounds, and that's what you've been discussing. Thank you for that, Jonathan. Now, I find, let's say you're going to a concert. If it's, more of a rock and roll concert or certainly a classical concert, and there's definitely a difference in feeling than there is when you just listen to music on any kind of recording device.
Ellen, that beautiful, beautiful entry into a subject I really wanted to discuss with you right now, which is that there are two major ways that sound affects us. One is that the sound goes into our ear, into our brain, affects our nervous system, our heart rate, our respiration, our brain waves. The other is that it goes into our body, affecting us on a cellular level. Now, going into our ear, into our brain, it's called psychoacoustics. Going into our body on a cellular level is called vibroacoustics. And I'd like to suggest that when you are at a live concert, there are both of those phenomena that are occurring. That you're getting the psychoacoustics, you're hearing it through your ears, but you're also hearing it through you and experiencing it through your body. And that doesn't happen for the most part unless you got it cranked up really loud with the giant speakers in a studio. And most of the time people are so into listening to music these days on earbuds and all that stuff, and they get a portion of the sonic experience, but not the full thing.
Well, you've been studying this for so many years, and the book is quite interesting and beautiful, Healing Sounds. And you talk about many people involved in sound healing. I imagine one of your colleagues or teachers is Dr. Alfred Tomatis. Is that how we say his name?
Tomatis, indeed. I'm one of the few Americans who actually ever studied with him. He passed on, and he did one workshop in, I believe it was Arizona, and I had the privilege of going there.
And what was his work about in terms of charging the brain with sound?
Well, Dr. Tomatis was really considered the Einstein of the ear. And he realized that just so many different aspects, and this was back a while ago, and his work still has not really, it's almost been forgotten more than really acknowledged, and it needs to be brought back into light, because on a level he understood that number one, the ear is understood to be, related to, among other things, the vagus nerve, which is, as you know, so very, very important in terms of increasing vagal tone, which many things are the enhancement of the immunological system, and blood pressure and stress, et cetera. So that's one of the things that he basically brought to our attention, but also the fact that we can indeed charge the ear with sound. And the best example of this one was the fact that back in the 60s, I believe they had something called Vatican II, which was they decided that these Gregorian monks and Benedictine monks no longer had to chant. These monks had a rigorous lifestyle. They would probably chant 8 to 10 hours a day, and then do a heavy duty, if you like, experience of farming and stuff like that. And they were quite happy and content. But after Vatican II, it was observed that they were sitting around fatigued and depressed in their, what's called cells in the monastery. And they brought in one doctor, and the first doctor said, well, it's obvious you're not getting enough sleep. So the monks slept more. But what happens when you're depressed and you sleep more? Doesn't help. The next doctor that they brought in was he took, I don't know if he took a case history of them or not, but he decided it was all nutritional. And he made these monks who had been basically vegetarians for many centuries. He basically had them become meat and potatoes guys. And Ellen, that didn't work either. And then they brought in Dr. Tomatis, and he basically had them begin chanting again. He basically stimulated their ears with a device called the electronic ear. And after about 6 weeks, they were able to resume their rigorous Benedictine lifestyle. So I think that's just a great, if you like, anecdotal story about how sound can charge the cortex of the brain.
Well, as you describe in Sound Healing, that there is a difference between listening and hearing. How would you describe that?
Hearing is a passive activity, and listening is an active activity.
So you have to think about it and do it.
Well, I mean, when you're listening to something, you're actually paying attention as opposed to the sound just sort of drifting by. And I mean, how much of our day is unconsciously spent with different sounds occurring that we don't pay any attention to, as opposed to the aspect of listening. And it's really interesting in the different yogic traditions. There is a yoga of listening called Shabd Yoga, which is basically nothing more or less than really deep listening, which is said to connect people with the divine aspects of consciousness. So you have a physiological benefit through listening, and also potentially a spiritual one.
Well, you're very, very easy to find. I know you make it easy. Everyone can go to healingsounds.com. And also, I know that I imagine at healingsounds.com, people can sign up for your newsletter, because I just got a beautiful copy of your latest newsletter.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. That's great. And the Healing Sounds website is actually an award-winning website, and it was designed because we wanted to create a venue through which all sorts of information and, if you like, sounds could be freely given. And yes, we also have an online store, and that's wonderful, but there's all sorts of things that people can really receive benefits from just simply by going to the Healing Sounds store. So I invite people to go to healingsounds.com and check it out.
So I never knew this until reading your newsletter, that Valentine's Day on February 14th next year, which is coming up, soon, it's called World Sound Healing Day as well.
Well, this is, if you like, the 21st World Sound Healing Day is coming up on Valentine's Day as an idea. And this is, if you like, something I got from meditation. And then as I began to deal with scientists and doctors and whatnot about the validity of it, you realize that we can literally, with our sounds that are encoded, if you like, with the intention of kindness and love, that we can literally send out a, vibrational form that is, if you like, trackable and shows that there's some sort of resonance occurring to assist the consciousness of the planet. It's and literally, this is the 21st year that we've done it, and there are thousands and thousands of people who join in and go there, and we, invite people. It's on February 14th, and we send a sonic Valentine to the Earth Mother.
Well, that all sounds like very positive in terms of positive sounds and positive vibrations. And when you're talking about the importance of how sound might physically affect our body, such as the immune system, how would that do that?
Well, one of my favorite aspects of sound is working with our own voice. And in particular, working with, if you like, the easiest aspect of our voice to work with is the hum. And we have a book called The Humming Effect that has been doing very, very well because it's basically an all-inclusive sound. Everybody can hum. A lot of people have issues with using their voice, and they're very, very judgmental, but nobody's judgmental about the hum.
Oh, that's interesting. So rather than saying something more challenging like singing a song, most people can hum. So that's it.
Everybody can hum, and it's wonderful because we've developed something we call conscious humming. And the first, we wrote this book, The Humming Effect, and it's a wonderful book. But we said, okay, people are not going to take this. It's also the first professionally published book ever written on humming. And I've been in this field for a really long time and can do all sorts of mantras, strange sounds, harmonic sounds, Tibetan deep voices, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're teaching this, a lot of people have difficulty, but nobody says no to humming. And then we found out that there were all this peer-reviewed data on the power of the hum. And that's actually in the first chapter of the book, is nothing more or less than the peer-reviewed data. And I'm just going to mention a few things to you, Ellen. You get, through humming and other self-created sounds, such as harmonic toning, you get the increased oxygen in your cells, lowered blood pressure and heart rate. And that's huge. If you can lower your blood pressure and your heart rate through humming, how much better is that? You get increased levels of melatonin. You get reduced levels of stress-related hormones. You get the release of oxytocin, which is the trust hormone, and you get the release of melatonin. Of course, that's great. But my favorite, perhaps, is the release of nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a vasodilator. It's a molecule associated with opening up our blood vessels, and it's also an antiviral agent, which is really incredible. So that I know of a number of people who are, and this is peer review stuff too, you can hum, you can do a nasal type of hum, and you can literally produce 15 times the amount of nitric oxide that is normally produced, which is enough to take care of a lot of nasty critters that lodge themselves in the nasal cavity. So I know of people who have taken care of, for example, sinusitis through humming.
Well, that makes sense because in sinusitis, there's actually a stiffening of the tissues, usually due to mucus that dries there because of histamine releases. So that's something that could be very helpful to a lot of people.
Right. And if you think about it, in a lot of shall we say, a little bit more of the esoteric anatomy traditions, a lot of imbalanced energies that cause pain and inflammation are because of stuck energy. And one of the great ways of moving stuck energy, of course, you get a physiological massage, or you can sonically massage yourself through projecting sound. And for example, the hum is the most powerful vibroacoustic, meaning it vibrates and massages you, vibroacoustic ability that we humans have. And it's really easy to do. So there's another level of basically working with just sort of giving yourself an internal massage through your own sound.
Well, it's something people can try on their own. There's no negative side effects. And I think most people would understand how sound could be related to stress reduction as well.
And Ellen, just as a thing, if I were to suggest that as anyone listening simply take some nice deep breaths, which are wonderful, as you know, anytime, nice deep slow breaths, and then you do a couple of 2 or 3 hums on just a straight note. In other words, you don't hum zippity doo dah, but you go Then you take another nice deep breath. And you do this for 2, 3, 4 times, and you will feel a difference. In fact, we suggest to people 2 things. Number 1, that they find themselves a comfortable place when they try this. And number 2, that they allow themselves a couple of minutes afterwards to sort of recalibrate themselves, because many people get very blissed out because of when they make the sound. So it's really as you said, people can try this themselves. Just don't try it if you're scrambling to, pick your kids up at the bus station or whatnot, because you will probably be very relaxed. And it's a great way. People who suffer, for example, from white coat syndrome, before they get their blood pressure, just taking a few deep breaths and then doing the it will bring your blood pressure down really quite amazingly. So just a little tip.
And the place to do that, I would say, it's funny you brought up picking your kids up in the car. The car is a great place to do things like that because you can be there alone. You can shut the door, have it parked, right?
Exactly.
Get there
Thank you.
5 minutes early, and then you have that space and time to practice something like that, and nobody's going to be hearing you if you don't really want to share it.
Yeah. So listen, real quick, thank you for that. Do it in your car, but don't be driving because it can really just make you a little blissed out.
Of course. But I want to thank you so much for being our guest today, Jonathan. And we've been speaking to Jonathan Goldman, international authority and pioneer in the field of sound healing. He has many books out, including The Humming Effect and his classic Healing Sounds, which has now been re-released. So the best place to find out everything Jonathan Goldman is go to healingsounds.com, where he has lots of his own organizational sounds that you can listen to, as well as links to the book and other information. So thank you so much for being our guest today, Jonathan.
Ellen, what a pleasure. Thank you so very, very much.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in once again to Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.